Chapter 5. Sugary looked at me and slowly shook her head. "Oh, Sam," she said. "Listen. It absolutely, positively couldn't have been Max." We were back in the bookstore. Sugary was sitting on the books on the chair. Spike and I were eating from a still warm carton of sweet and sour pork that the Crannells had ordered, eaten little of, and left. "It just couldn't." She looked at me quizzically. "Could it?" "Not unless he came from the terrace wearing black. I've got a witness, remember? Besides," I said, chewing on a Chinese vegetable I couldn't identify, "it's not in his character." Spike said, "He's one of the finer human beings. Considerate, thoughtful, and gentle," Sugary said. "And fun," she added quickly. "Like he'd come to do dinner, so he'd never just toss a can of glop on the floor. He'd always stop to play ball. One time we played hide-and-seek for a whole hour." She looked at me bleakly. "What are we going to do?" "Prove him innocent," I said. Spike licked his lips. "Lot easier said than done." I nodded. "I know." Sugary seemed to moan and then hung her head dejectedly over the edge of a book. "This is terrible," she said in a sad, defeated voice. "This is just the worst night of my whole entire life." I looked at her flatly. "All 17 months of it." "Hey, listen, Sam, don't talk down to me," she said. "Maybe I'm young, but I know how to suffer." "We're all suffering," Spike said. "Sam is too. He just doesn't like to show it." I said nothing, and finished eating. I pushed away the carton. It was 10 after midnight. It was time to get to work. The Kit Kat Club is one of those dives on the edge of the East Village. A dive is something like a nightclub, only lower, which is why it's called the dive. The entrance to the Kit Kat was rundown and dirty. A blue neon sign, only half of it working, blinked, "It at Ub." The neighborhood was foul. A deserted warehouse with its windows busted out stood yawning like an old toothless giant in the dark. The rest of the street held abandoned tenements and long empty lots. I looked at the club again. "It at Ub." A sweaty-looking bouncer leaned flat against the door. "I once defined a bouncer as a two-way doorman. He's the guy who lets you in and the guy who kicks you out." I wasn't sure he'd let me in. And then I got lucky. The door swung open. A waiter came out with a sandwich and a Coke, which he handed to the bouncer while I beat it through the door. Inside, it was blue. Everything was blue. The carpet, the ceiling, the furniture, the mood. Jazz floated over the thick, smoky air. Not loud, hard rock. This was soft, dreamy jazz. People dressed in everything from sequins to jeans filled the small round tables. A couple of musicians blew music from the stage. I squinted through the bad-smelling, eye-stinging air till I found the guy I wanted. Tom hadn't changed. His tail was still bushy and his eyes were still bright. I motioned. He waved, made a big happy grin, and came trotting across the floor. "Long time," he said. "Man, haven't seen you since... when?" "Since the Jackson case," I said. "That's the one," he said, nodding. "The 795. I laughed. Tom and I had been roommates at the precinct, and he still knew the codes. A 795 was a missing person. "What's it this time?" he said. "An 1126. "A burglary? Hey, lots of luck," he said, dryly. "Is Scratch around?" "Yeah, back office. He's been cozied up with Cheater for an hour. Cheater's still in business? Hey, Tom looked at me. Is water still wet? Right, I said. Cheater Rivera is a fence. A fence is a guy who buys stuff that's been stolen from the burglars who stole it. Cheater's specialty is hot stolen jewels. Scratch is his roommate. Tom said, "You want to see Scratch, you'll have to wait. They got the door to that office locked tighter'n a tomb." I sat in a shadow and listened to the sweet blue harmonies of jazz. Once in a while the clarinetist hit a note that made my neck hairs ripple, and I thought about Max. Talk about the blues. Max was in much deeper trouble than he knew. I turned at the sudden sound of voices in the hall. "Nice going," Cheater said, his voice leaking out at me from underneath the door. "It's a pleasure doing business." The door clicked open. "Yeah, and the pleasure's all yours," the man said. He turned in the doorway, a balding burglar wearing run-down Reeboks and a dirty pair of sweats. Cheater, in a cream-colored suit, cracked a grin. "Like your mama done told you, kid, crime doesn't pay." He laughed and checked his watch. I peered into the office. Scratch, on a table, sat slurping a plate of cream. "I got a meeting," Cheater said. "Come on, kid, I'll walk you." He fumbled at the wall switch and slapped off the light. Under cover of darkness, I streaked to the door. The door locked behind me. Click, click, click.